Hello and welcome, Exiles, to my updated guide for the Meteor Bear for League Start in point 0.5 for Path of Exile 2 Return of the Ancient. This one's based on a build I really enjoyed last league, the Meteor Bear, because let's be honest, if you're looking at the patch notes, very little changed for the character. There were a couple tiny nerfs to, well, Bater's Vengeance and a little bit on Max Rage, but ultimately, the patch notes had a rather large lack of notes related to the bear, which in a way is a good thing because it means the build's still strong, and in a way is a bad thing because, oh, we didn't get any new toys. But the thing is, if the build's new to you, you might still really enjoy it because personally for me, this has been one of my favorite builds I've played in the development of the early access for Path of Exile 2. Now, this character is all about swipe, swipe, slam, and this skill called Walking Calamity, which rains down meteors for a duration while giving you some gain damage and adding some real atmospheric girth to your gameplay. Now, this character is also something where I've taken some time to update the early game and the progression of the character. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the volume in game because I want to talk about what I've done to improve the guide for those of you who want to play the build. Number one is I went through and did a complete fresh start run, which you can either find with this VOD link. I'll have a link in the description as well here, where you can watch what it looks like to do a campaign run with the Meteor Bear. You start out pretty early on, just real modest with just swipe, swipe, slam. You have Maul and Furious Slam. And I played that pretty much the entire way through up until some point around the interludes. You get access to Walking Calamity, at which point you can start activating Walking Calamity as you go through zones, which I'll try to find somewhere where I'm in a zone activating it, which I guess I missed something right here. But yeah, as you can see right here, this is me activating Walking Calamity, where the enemies start getting hit by meteors, as well as it gives you a nice gain damage. This character's run, I played with essentially a claw I found, or not claw, sorry, talisman I found in Act 3. You'll notice the Act 3 talisman, this rabbit talisman, is the same one I have on for Act 4, as well as interludes. And we were still having moderately good damage at that point to kill the enemies with some level of ease. It's not at the damage level of Twisters or Snipe, something that's just overkill OP, but I didn't have any issues. Pretty much every boss I first tried for the most part, barring a couple exceptions where I was reading chat and died to, let's say, a ground effect from a bird that I didn't know it left a ground effect. I just killed the bird, I started looking at chat, and then I died to a degen, stuff like that. Anyways, point is, ended up finishing this run at about 6 hours and 20 minutes. You'll notice the VOD's about 7 hours and 20 because I would pause the timer, I'd yap with chat, I'd be, looking at a new teaser for this or that, stuff like that. There was a little bit of delay time, but I tried to keep the timer mostly accurate. There's a couple times I messed up, so although the timer ended at 6:20, it was probably around like 6:25 or 6:27, something like that. You get the idea. Either way, this is just meant to be like, here's how I would progress the character. The biggest changes I made from what I had initially on this guide was I changed a bit of the early game pathing to be a bit more efficient in terms of damage and early power, as well as you may notice that this character, if you're familiar with it last league, I used the Talisman Keystone, Lord of the Wilds, right away in Act 2, and I used it all the way through. I have now updated this to say I only recommend using it starting more into like early mid-level maps. And the reasoning being is the talisman, the advantage you get from the talisman is you get base crit from the malice implicit, which is only really useful when you start having the extra passives to grab percent crit chance, crit damage bonus, that sort of stuff. As well as once you get your fourth lab, you get the bonded modifier lab, which is when you can start getting these talismans that give you 10% skill speed as their bonded mod. Not to mention, we're getting a huge like boatload of new runes, which are going to have bonded mods. My guess is this Ascendancy is getting a pretty solid buff with these bonded mods that are going to come with the new runes. And I will try my best to update this guide later on when we know what those mods are. But for example, what I was mentioning here about the Scepter is skill speed, attack speed is a pretty limited resource, generally speaking. And this doesn't say it here because the site doesn't pull the bonded mod, but the bonded mod for this owl idol, this fox idol, the snake idol, stuff like that is all 10% skill speed. So by the end game, when we had a 3 socket scepter, we're getting 30% skill speed just from the bottom mods on the Scepter, which is a huge feels good responsiveness buff of the character. So that's one big thing we're changing here about the character is Spirit Reservation, Lord of the Wilds. I'd recommend holding off on that until you can start getting a Omen Scepter with a couple of sockets for some skill speed with that fourth lab. Otherwise, I'd recommend picking 3 reservations with 100 spirit from this category here. Things like Herald of Ash plus Warbanner, Savage Fury, stuff like that is probably what I'd recommend. Warbanner, Savage Fury, great damage multipliers, and then Herald of Ash, some nice clear. Later on, when you start getting to stack cold damage as extra with Meteor's Vengeance, then you can start looking at something like Herald of Ice and getting some chain explosions just from your swipes alone. Now I want to talk a bit about building blocks the character. How does this function? In the written guide, I go over it pretty simple. We're using a combination of armor, with armor applies to Ellie as our mitigation layer, stacking as much life as we can with life on gear, and then combining that with what I think is largely one of the most OP items in the entire game and feels good item, Defiance of Destiny. Pretty simple is if the enemy can't one-shot you and you're wearing Defiance of Destiny, you're not going to die because every time they go to hit you, you're going to heal the full. They don't manage to one-shot you. They hit 20% off your pool. They go to hit you again. Defiance heals you back up, so on and so forth, which pairs amazingly with something like a raw mitigation layer like armor where it makes the hit do less damage rather than doing something like avoidance. That's what Defiance of Destiny and armor kind of pair really nice for. And then you can also combine these things with things like Made to Last, which is notable on the tree, and Scarred Faith, which gives you damage you've mitigated as recovery for both your energy shield and your physical damage to give you some sustain. Combine that all with a bit of leech, like with Fizz to leech on your gear, and you're going to have a good time. On top of that, in the new league, they're adding Ward, which will pair very well with scaling some life and Defiance as well. So I'd heavily recommend trying to add on some Ward where you can. We'll kind of see what the new mechanics like. They haven't really given us numbers on it, so we don't 100% know. But I think that is going to pair very well with this build. And I'd like to add it to the guide if Ward ends up being fairly good. Definitely something to keep your eye out on when we get more information on that. Now, one other thing I'd like to mention is GGG is adding support for in-game guides where you can pull up a tab that will highlight supports you need for various skills along with like tree progression and stuff. I don't know when we're going to get access to that sort of stuff, but I would like to add that as soon as I can, like a .build file to this page so you can basically download that and then import it into your PoE for if you're following the guide. I don't have that yet, but hopefully we get the information for that soon. The past couple leagues, GGG has waited till basically league launch, not giving us a tree, and we're kind of scrambling last minute when the league's already live to try to figure this stuff out. So hopefully they give it that sort of stuff beforehand for the guide, ideally, but we will see how that goes. But ideally, I'd like to make that for the Meteor Bear as well as the Spirit Walker I'm going to be working on for my personal league start. So yeah, that has to do with defensive layers and the build file. Another thing, offensively, in game, how does this character actually really work? There are essentially 4 things that are happening. Number 1 is our default attack, our maul, our swipe, swipe, swipe. This is generating us rage every time we hit. The maul by default generates rage. We support it with rage on hit as well. And whatever sources of rage on hit we have on the tree means whenever we pop the enemy, we're getting rage gen. This does 2 things. Number 1, rage gives us a more damage multiplier, which means we're going to hit harder with our attacks. And number 2 is Walking Calamity is a skill which gets to be activated if you are generating rage. It's a glory skill where the way you generate the glory is by generating rage over your cap. So anytime you're generating rage with hits over your cap, you're generating the ability to activate Walking Calamity. The other thing it does is we have this Furious Slam here on our left click, which this is a skill which gets empowered by consuming 10 rage to hit a lot harder. So in the gameplay, when we go swipe, swipe, slam, we're swiping to generate that rage black, and then we're slamming. Another thing about this character, and the whole reason, the biggest motivator for why we're choosing the Shaman Ascendancy is for the Furious Wellspring node. This node having constant rage regen just makes everything feel so much smoother. Now, you can, if you really want to have extra buttons in your build, you can play a different Ascendancy. You can put on basically a Rage Warcry generation method where you proc the Warcry to generate the rage, to then be able to use your abilities, and you can micromanage that. I personally don't enjoy that. and I think this feels a lot better. But if you're okay with those extra buttons, you can do that. That's not a pass-fail check of something you can or can't do. But I would argue that not only does this give you a bunch of quality of life, the other nodes you're getting along with it, Wisdom of the Magi and the DR node from Reactive Growth, are really strong nodes. And there are reasons to pick the Ascendancy on top of this. Things like the skill speed on the Scepter and a lot of the other bonded mods you get throughout are really, really useful. Now, I don't think unfortunately, oh wait, it does. Okay, I was thinking didn't showcase the mods you get from the bonded, but actually if you hover the weapon, it showcases that I'm getting 30 skill speed from bonded mods. You'll notice down here I'm getting +1 attack all from a bonded mod. I'm getting gain physics extra from a bonded mod. I'm getting gain additional charge from bonded mod. So actually you can see some of the bonded mods. Go ahead and look through them if you're curious. Another thing they're doing is you'll notice on this chest piece I use soul cores for % life. The thing is, in the patch notes, we actually got a pretty big buff to the body runes. The runes that provide life are now going to provide 60 base, and any basic rune that provides life as a bonded mod is going to give 20 flat instead of 10 flat. So they're actually better than soul cores, I'm pretty sure now, because the soul cores were only slightly marginally better than the flat life runes, which got a fairly significant buff of like an additional 30 flat life. Just one thing to talk about is the bonded mods are going to get buffed. There's going to be a lot more runes. There's a lot of value in this that I can't stress enough is a big selling point of the Ascendancy. You don't use it initially because you don't have runes right when you're going through the campaign, but later on as you upgrade the character, you have runes. So anyways, as I was saying, swipe to generate rage, fury, or not fury, furious slam you can use, which will use 2 palms of your bear and it hits twice. And this thing is honestly a very large portion of your DPS. It's more DPS than the Walking Calamity. The Walking Calamity creates these meteors, these big meteors and these small meteors that hit enemies on a regular basis. But your Furious Slam, this thing right here, hits really hard and it's actually more dangerous than this Walking Calamity meteors are. So just a little context there of what's going on. Another thing is, on top of Walking Calamity, giving you this nice DPS on mobs around you and giving you gain fires extra, is Ancestral Cry. This was actually, for me, the biggest like surprise factor of I really, really like this thing, is because what this does is it turns your bear into whenever you swipe, you get ancestral bear images that swipe as well, which I can find a clip of that just to showcase you. But B, it makes every single one of your attacks count as ancestrally boosted. And that's really cool for specifically, I don't have a support gem in my inventory right now, but Fist of War 3 later on, when you start activating Ancestral Cry more often, Fist of War 3 has like this huge, more powerful Ancestral Boost slam to its support, and every attack you do while under Ancestral Cry counts as ancestrally boosted. So even though you have that 14-second cooldown or whatever it is on Fist of War 3, actually every slam while this buff is up is getting that bonus to the attacks, and it gives you some really crazy burst DPS. The way you generate Ancestral Cry is essentially having a decent amount of gain fire from your Ascendancy here, having Blazing Critical later on your swipe attack to generate the gain 15 fire there, and it gives you glory based on like ignites or something. You can see it on your bar as it fills up. You'll probably be able to do it like 2 times a map roughly, once towards the end at the boss and once during it to get the swipes and the extra slams going. But when you have that buff up, you feel just fire god incarnate type of thing. It's really, really cool. And then outside of that, we also have Pounce, which applies marks that give us leech life as life and mana. Another thing I want to take note of is when it comes to leech is OP as hell and you really want it. The thing is, later on in this character, as I upgrade this build and get towards Ancestral Cry and stuff going on, this thing, when this buff is up, it converts all of our damage to fire. You can get around this and still have some base fizz with the gain physical mod, which I go through in my How to Craft a Talisman video. You'll notice on the Scepter there is a gain 32% as extra physical. That is very important, specifically because gain mod cannot be converted. So you might have Ancestral Cry, you proc it, you get all your fire damage or all your fizz converted to fire, but that's only your base fizz. Any fizz that is generated through gain fizz still counts as fizz, and thus you can still leech it. Most sources of leech in the game are Fizz Leech, Attack Leech, Fizz Leech, Attack Leech for mana. So that's one important note I want to make is Leech is really, really important for your sustain. You at least want it on your gloves, Life Leech, or on your ring. So keep it in your eye out whenever you're leveling this character for Fizz Leech for your gloves or Fizz Leech for your ring. It's a big portion of making your character sustain feel good. They are nerfing Leech. I think it's more of a top end late game nerf, but it's something to keep in mind as it won't be as important later on or as OP as it was late game, but still very, very good for your sustain, if that makes sense. As far as I am understanding the Leech changes, that's what I'm gathering. It still seems like it's still going to be pretty good, but not as like overwhelmingly like zoomy HP recovery. Granted, our character has late game recovery through recoup from life, Scarred Faith notable, recoup from ES on the Divine Shield Keystone, as well as Divine's Destiny. So her sustain's going to be fine, but that's one thing to keep in mind for later on. Real quick, I forgot to cut this into the video. One important thing you should know, if you're following my guide, I always try to make better trading lists so you have a good idea of what you can search for to get yourself upgrades, and this is no different this league as well. I have it under the Act 1 section. It's a better trading import code, and what all you got to do is control C this entire string of text, Path of Exile trade to the extension is called, let me log in first. The extension is called Better Trading, and you go to import a folder, Control V. It should say Meteor Bear 15 bookmarks. You click save, and then in this, you will have trade searches designed for making yourself the best upgrade for the best value, i.e., I have gone through and I've given weightings to every valuable mod for the character, and I've assigned it a weighted sum. Most of these items that are rare weighted sum searches, I've assigned a low weighting, which should mean they're fairly cheap items. And if you're trying to make an upgrade for yourself, what I'd recommend doing is you say, hey, I have this amount of budget to work with. Maybe I have 5 exalts. You can search within that price range, and then you can click this sum here to give you the highest value in terms of what my trade weighted sum I've applied to the various mods, a cumulative value of all those mods put together. So I did that, and I have double res, armor applies, life, flat fire. That's kind of the idea of how the system works, and I've done that for a bunch of rare items, as well as I have showcased a couple of early game items you can go for as well, like some of the uniques. I don't have all the uniques I used in this build listed here, but this is just some options that you have that could be solid for the early game of the character if they're at a good price. So yeah. Anyways, that's the trade search there. I will be doing a similar thing for the Spirit Walker as well. Anyways, back to the rest of the video. Another thing I want to note here is alternative options. I get asked about these a lot while I was playing the character. Rampage and Fury of the King. TLDR on Rampages, I did not personally like it when I played it, but that doesn't mean it's a bad skill. I would say try it out and see for yourself if you like it or not. I just found it felt clunky and it felt bad in terms of rage sustain. So I didn't personally like it. It does allow you to kind of phase through enemies. It does give you more mobility. So try it out, see if you like it. I just wasn't a fan. And the other thing is Fury of the King. This is also pretty dang solid. The biggest drawback I have with this is it makes your character kind of slow, kind of sluggish. You have a weapon that has a pretty slow base attack speed, and the main skill, the Molten Crash, the jump skill, is relatively slow in my opinion. But the thing is, if you like it, it still can be fairly solid damage, and you should consider trying it out. But these are just the reasons why I do not have these in the guide, is because I didn't personally like them. Okay, so yeah, that goes over some of the basics of the character. In the endgame tab, if you have this open, it goes over some gear upgrade priority, just to have an idea of what's the importance of doing different upgrades for your character. I also go over gem link suggestions, i.e. what can you do early game versus what should you do as you're upgrading your character, getting towards a 5 link or a 6 link. What are links you can start to consider, especially if you can start to look at more expensive upgrades like the better lineage gem options. So yeah, that's what I have to say for all that stuff. Ultimately, this guide is fairly similar to what it was in 0.4 patch because the patch notes didn't change that much on the character. Whew. Anyways, hopefully you guys have enjoyed this rundown for the Meteor Bear. I definitely can recommend it as a league start. I had a lot of fun with it last league. The reason I'm not personally playing it is because I like trying out new things. And this league, the new things are the Fist of Stone Monk, which is called Martial Artist, but let's be honest, Fist of Stone is going to carry that ascendancy. It's not even close. That node is insane. And then for what I personally want to play is I want to try taming basically the unique beast bosses and have them fight for us. I do have this revenge fantasy of having the Silverback or Silver Fist, the monkey in Act 3, defeat Silver Fist in Act 3. I think it would be hilarious, you know, fighting fire with fire, so to speak. So yeah, anyways, that's the update on the Meteor Bear guide. Good luck on your Leaguestarter Exiles. And next up, I'll be trying to make a kind of a fleshed out guide for the for the character for the spirit walker. Basically, that's what I'm prepping for Leaguestarter. I'll make a mobile leagues page for it, etc., etc. Thanks for watching. As always, take care, Exiles. Peace out and have a good one.